Hey everyone, and welcome back to Remember This Tech. Today I'm going to try my first Hackintosh build. Never done it before, but we're going to try it. And we're going to use this PC here. This is a 8th gen Intel i7 CPU, the 8700, 6 core, 12 thread, and I've got it on a Gigabyte Aorus Z390 Ultra motherboard, and I've got a number of NVMe slots in there. We got a 650 watt Corsair power supply, nice heatsink cooler, and we've got this new Intel 670 1 terabyte drive I'm going to put in there, and then we have a 580 graphics card, 8 gig of RAM, and we are going to put it in this fractal design case. Without further ado, we'll put this drive in there and we'll start the process of creating our boot install disk USB, which I'll have to use on my Mac. I might have to use my Mac Pro or my iMac that I have, and it depends on which one works easier. So without further ado, come along with me and hopefully we can get this Hackintosh build running, and then we'll see how it runs as compared to like Mac. And we're going to be using Ventura today, hopefully. That'll work. So come on, let's get started. Come on. Disk, go to erase, call it Ventura. Select the file system to macOS extended journaled and click erase. Should erase it and prep it for your image creation on your USB or your external drive. Done. The next step is head on over to download Mac OS X Ventura and go to the App Store. Over here is the App Store, and you just click get and it'll ask to download it, and then you'll say yes and it'll come over here and it'll download it, and I'll show you what to do next. Click on this link here and it will bring you to the Apple site, how to install or create a bootable installer, and there should be commands down here for Ventura, and you need to copy these or manually type them all in. So in my case, I'm going to copy them, and then you want to go over and you want to open the terminal. Paste in the commands that you just copied. Now on the end of this, my volume is going to be different. Obviously you want to change that to Ventura. So backspace and switch this to Ventura, or whatever you called your drive, and then I had to switch over to my iMac. I wasn't able to do what I'm supposed to do with the OpenCore configurator on my MacBook Pro M1 for whatever reason. So I re-downloaded, and I'm also downloading the Comet Lake OpenCore EFI configs here, because that is 8700 8th gen chip that I'm using for this build. So the next step, I've got to go into downloads folder. You want to uncompress or unzip the EFI folder if it's zipped, then go into the KTeX folder, and then you want to select the ones that you don't want to use and delete. This is not needed. Trash. This is not needed. And there's a couple more that aren't needed. but whatever you don't need for your build, delete it. It'll reduce the size of the EFI. Next step you need to do is download the OpenCore configurator, and you'll be using that to mount the EFI and also do a couple of configuration changes for the boot configurator. Why is there so many ads? So once you've got your OpenCore configurator downloaded, and you drag the EFI core configurator into your applications folder. Now once that is done, you should see it here, and then you should be able to right click on it and open. Now it may take a while depending on your speed of your system, but once it pops open, it should give you an error. You should say open, and once it opens, it'll come up, and you'll also see it up here, EFI on disk identifier. So it should come up here, and you want to mount partition and put in your password. Here's the EFI partition, and you're supposed to take your EFI you edited, and you're supposed to drag it over in there and replace everything in there. And I still have my EFI in the downloads. Do not merge it, replace it. Always replace it, and then hopefully you should open it, and it should have your files, right, KTEX for the whatever gen you're using for your Intel CPU. Mine's Coffee Lake. So once that's done, we will go on to our next step, which is opening the OpenCore configurator, and then we will go on to the next step. Once you're in that FE file from your boot disk, go into OC. In the config plist, you're going to have to open it, edit it. Got a couple of errors on this. Next part, you want to select kernel on the left of the OpenCore configurator, and select all the items that you already deleted from your FE file, and then hit the minus button here, and that should remove them. Next, you would want to go to NVRAM. Click on the third hexadecimal here on the right here for the boot args. Change AICID from 1 to 11. Over here, for the next line, make a space and then type in IGFXNONLN equals 1, and that will prevent your screen from going black upon boot up. The next part, you want to select the platform info on the left, and then come over and find your Intel CPU that's listed here to the best that you can find. I have an Intel i7 8700. It was a Coffee Lake, and it should be this system. That one looks like the best because that's the CPU I have. So the next step you want to do is come down here and check coverage. And check coverage will check to see if the serial number generated here is the one that is still supported. And copy over the serial number and submit it. Okay, so if it says unable to validate the purchase, that's actually good because it means nobody else has used it, as far as I know. So you can leave that serial number as is. Now, once you have that done, if it showed up green and it validated the purchase date, then the last step, regenerate your key because your serial number, because it would be invalid because it means somebody already has that. So go ahead and file, and you want to have this selected, and you want to save and ignore the error, and then you want to close the quit OpenCore configurator. Now we're on to the next step. plugged in everything. Got the 27-inch monitor here. Got my boot disk. Hopefully the configurator worked. Let's see how this goes. All right, so, okay, everything's working. Just got the test monitor out. 8700, 3.2 gigahertz. Let's go into the boot menu because we need to switch it. Drag the PNY to the first and then the Intel drive, because we've got to be able to boot from the USB drive. So, and the next part is we've got to be able to make sure that the video output is set to the video card and not on board. Don't particularly want to. I want to use the 580. Let's try this. Save and exit. Well, I'm trying this Hackintosh boot USB for Ventura on my A700, and I got a few different options here this time. See what this does. See if it loads anything different. And look at this. Are you seeing this? Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's loading. I think it's loading the Mac OS X. This is a pain in the butt to get to work. Copied over to the partition and I had to use my iMac onto the USB drive. And it is loading. And I'm using my test monitor. Whoa, what? Oh wow. I wonder, we have to use the disk utility. Sorry for the bad lighting, sorry for the non-capture, but I had to use my test monitor and everything's in disarray, but we're gonna have to use disk utility to partition the drive, the Intel NVMe macOS journal from what I read, and I'm gonna call it Mac Hack Ventura. Mac OS extended journal, use GUI IAD, and that is the Intel drive, and it'll have to erase it so it's compatible. So once that's done, close this and then install Mac OS Ventura here and see if it sees the drive and see if it comes through now. All right, this is the final install. Continue. See if it works or not. I can't get my capture device to work, so we'll have to suffer through. We'll agree. We want to select the disk, which is the Mac Hack Ventura, 1 terabyte. Continue. It says 41 minutes, 34 minutes. It's speeding up. I wonder if it depends on like how fast your drive is, how fast your system is, and how fast your USB drive that you use to boot from with the Hackintosh OS is. I'm not counting my chickens till they've hatched, so to speak, because it's still got to install. It's still got to boot up. I've got to copy over the EFI folder, the NVMe when I'm done after it's booted up a couple times. That will allow me hopefully to not have to boot with the USB drive in the system all the time. So we will come back when this is done and we'll show you if it worked or not. Fingers crossed. Who knows? So far, so good. I had to go back to the test monitor. Something about video drivers or something just not working. I don't know. It's rebooting again. Continuing the install. It says 29 minutes remaining. It said 15 when I redid the first reboot, but continuing on. Fingers crossed, you know. And we got our third boot, and hopefully it's final, maybe. Whoa, check this out, everybody. Check it out. Check it out. We are now at this is the setup phase. So far, we are on the right path, right? For right now, I'm not gonna transfer information, so I'm gonna select not now. We'll set it up later. We'll skip this because we'll set it up later. Don't want location services, but we do want, you can set up Siri later if you want. Auto. Keep in mind, this is just a crappy test monitor. We're going to set up the good one later and try to get the pass through once this is done. And we have to set this up, so I'll fast forward through this. Alright everybody, got the Hackintosh to work so far. We're not done yet. Hooked it up to the 27-inch monitor. What we really need to do now is the last step. We need to download OpenCore, and then we need to copy the EFI folder, which I already have on the USB, so I'll just skip this step. See if the front ports work or not. What we have to do is copy it over to the NVMe on this drive. That way we don't have to rely on the USB to boot up. We have to find EFI folder here. Alright, I'm copying over the EFI folder. So just like before, you have to download the OpenCore configurator and put it in your application folder, launch it and mount your hard drive here, your partition. Then EFI will show up. You copy over your EFI folder that you had from before, that you originally pasted in the boot drive for USB. That will contain your processor information, like mine's Coffee Lake 8th gen. And hopefully you won't need the USB to boot after that. So what I'm going to do is try to boot now. Fingers crossed. Shut down and restart. Oh wait, Ventura. Look at, I think it's gonna work. And I think it's gonna work. Uh-oh. Doesn't like it. What does it mean? I have to reset NVRAM? How bad will that screw it up? Sometimes it works for my old Mac, but I did that and see if it'll work now. Sometimes that's a good sign. Resetting NVRAM is like one of those Mac go-to fixes, and now we have to wait for it to build or do whatever it has to do, right? And I think we got it. We got it. We got it. The first Hackintosh on Remember This Tech. You saw it here. Whew. What a struggle. And I still can't get the capture device to work either, for whatever reason. For now, it boots. Hopefully it still boots when we reboot it. So, success. Yes, yes. And maybe we can do some tests on it. See if it performs as good as maybe its equivalent, you know, 2017-ish Mac Mini or something. Got 36,997 for the Geekbench OpenGL score. And here's some of the specifications and specs for the system. 8-core CPU, 3.2 gigahertz, and 4 meg Val2 cache, 16 gig of RAM. And here's some of these stats. Results from the CPU score for the MacBook Pro 14-inch, 2413 for a single core and 10,644 for multi-core score. And file compression. Different stats here. You can compare them with the Hackintosh i7-8700 CPU. So we've completed our first Hackintosh build on Remember This Tech, and let's break it down, shall we? In comparison, the system that I built on the i7-8700 6-core 12-thread CPU cost around $450 total used parts. Of course, depends on where you get them and what price that you get them for. But I had a lot of these parts already, so I just threw it together. If you were to buy a MacBook Pro M1 laptop with 16 gig of RAM and only a 512 gig hard drive, that base system for the 14-inch Mac Pro is going to run you at a minimum $1599 to $1799 depending on sales and such. I know that MacBook M2 is already out, but we're comparing the Mac 1 for this purpose because that's what I have. So if you take $1,700 minus $450, you can weigh your options there. With the Hackintosh, you get a far superior graphics card and you can upgrade it, whereas the MacBook Pro M1 chip, you can't upgrade your graphics card. In my Hackintosh, I can throw in another 16 gig of RAM. That'll cost me like under $30. But typically when you buy a MacBook Pro, you're gonna be stuck with those specifications. If you spec it with 16 gig of RAM, that's what you're stuck with because it's soldered onto the motherboard. Now you can typically replace the SSDs and NVMe's on MacBooks, but if you were to spec a similar 1 terabyte drive, you're looking at another $400 on top of your price tag. So there's pros, a lot of pros in making a Hackintosh, in the fact that you can upgrade it, you can get a lot more bang for your buck. You know, the quality build there in the MacBook Pro, the ease of transportation, carrying it around, you can edit videos with, on it, you can play some games. It has a lot to be said. I can't lug this PC tower around with me on travel. I can't bring it to a friend's house unless I set it up, and it's just not practical in that sense. So there's pros and cons for each, and the product build quality of the MacBook is nice too. Something to note is that Apple to use their own silicone in the M1 and M2 chip. So what does that mean? Well, you'll only be able to run these for a limited time, or you'll have to rely on the older OS versions that can work on Intel-based CPUs, because eventually these OSs are going to the wayside. Also, something to note in this build, I couldn't get my internal Wi-Fi to work on the Gigabyte board. So I'll either have to get a separate NIC that's known to work with Mac OS X, or I'm going to have to try to use OpenCore Configurator or Patcher to try to get a workaround to make it work. The bottom line is, if you truly want the best Mac experience, save up and buy yourself a MacBook Pro or maybe even a MacBook Air on the top end. I'm not advocating that you build one of these or not, but I just wanted to see if it could be done. And we've did it. It's up to you to decide whether you want to do one of these or not. So thanks for watching. Remember this tech.